Welcome to Stuck in the Middle, 4th episode. And in today's podcast, we're going to talk about a subject or a theme that's controversial at this point. Should politicians have a retirement age? Those of you who saw President Biden and the Trump debate have got all kinds of views. And Stuck in the Middle, we talk about psychological themes, largely about ambivalence. Do we do this or we do this? And I think politicians always have a ambivalence, so we are very privileged and honored to have you, Dr. Ong Kuan Min, here.
Yeah, thank you.
You have both been a professional as well as a politician, so it's indeed a privilege to have you on this podcast. And of course, we also have one of our very own professors from the Department of Psychology. What I'd like to do is, before I actually dive into the subject of should politicians have a retirement age, maybe I'd like you to just have you say a line about yourself as well as a little bit about the subject itself before we dive into each one of you.
Ladies first?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So I am Dr. Athirah Yasmin from Faculty of Psychology and Social Sciences. I will definitely explain more on from the psychological perspective.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Yasmin. Dr. Ong, very quickly.
My name is Kuan Min. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor for External Engagement at Taylor's University. One line would be, I think it's good for politicians in executive positions to have term limits rather than age limits. I'm happy to discuss that more.
Thank you very much. Well, what better group can we get here to discuss this critical topic in this podcast? So, thank you very much, Kuan Min, and thank you, Dr. Yasmin. So, first of all, before we start anything at all, I think there's a very interesting concept that Kuan Min brought about, term limits. So, I think in the US presidential elections, I think after Franklin Roosevelt, I think he stayed on for 25 years, and they said just period, let's stop it with 2 terms, 4 years and 4 years. But it doesn't happen at the Senate or the House of Congress.
No.
And interestingly, it also doesn't happen in Malaysia, because I think since 1980, when I left university until now, I've just probably had a combination of the Mahathir and the Anwar era, and that was about it.
And there's only one exception, Tan Sri, which is the State Assembly of Penang, where they passed a constitutional amendment to limit the term of the Chief Minister to 2 terms. That's one.
Yeah,
with regards to political parties, my own party, the DAP, we also passed a party constitutional amendment to limit the tenure of the Secretary General, the top position in the party, to a maximum of 3 terms. So there are some precedents here in Malaysia.
Wonderful, thank you. But let me just go back a little bit, because I was just trying to look at this book, which is something that I find it very interesting, Aging and Development. And gerontology is a very interesting subject, and both Coleman and O'Hanlon are very experienced academics as well as researchers. And I just wanted to ask this question. What's the logic behind the retirement age? I know politically Bismarck many years ago brought this, has another perspective as opposed to Marxism, because he wanted to make sure that people have opportunities. But what's the logic behind the retirement age? Maybe we start with Professor. Why should people retire? Why don't we, as they say in Malay, kerja sampai mati? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tan Sri. All right, so I would like to start with the definitions of the retirement or the retirement age itself. All right, so from psychology perspective, normally late adulthood phase is referring to the age that start from 65 and beyond. And some psychologists also have divided into 2 phases. Okay, first is young old, that is between 65 to 85, and also old, that is 85 and beyond.
Wow, we find all these terms to suit us. Okay, so I'm just going to get into the young old.
Yeah,
nice feeling. Yeah.
All right. So from here, okay, we cannot deny that everyone will go through the what we call as the nature biological aging processes. Okay, and due to this reason, okay, we can say that continuous working is considered as undesirable. Okay, so go back to where we can say that knowledge people, okay, knowledge person normally they when it comes to certain extent they are able to what we call that replace, okay, or what we call as substitute the physical strength.
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
so-
But then you see, we say that most of the research says that when people retire, they stop working, they die early.
Not really. It's
Yeah,
the
but
same
that's
with
the
your
research.
lifestyle.
The research says if I have lost purpose in life and I stopped working, and then there's a chance that I might actually disappear from the face of this earth. What do you think, Kenman?
Tan Sri, I think when you say retire, it doesn't necessarily mean that you stop working. You may retire from one job, but you go on to other kinds of engagements.
Thank you.
So maybe I won't talk so much about the psychological aspect. I think I go back to more economics and also socio-political. Because if you think about it, when we think about how human history has evolved, at one point in time, we were expected to live only until we're 40, 50. There are no formal jobs.
Longevity is-
Right? So only later on when we started living longer and when we started having formal jobs and when we started having a civil service, that's when the retirement age would start. Right? And the retirement age in many countries, developing countries, including also in Malaysia, has been increased slowly but surely because of longevity. And I think the socio-political part about having a retirement age in corporations as well as in the civil service is so that when you get to a certain age, you want to have some sort of a renewal within the organization, right? So I think that's why whether it's in the civil service or in corporations, people want to have a certain retirement age whereby if you want to continue, it will be in a different capacity, it will be in a different contract, and you will be able to, use your wisdom that you've gained to bless other people and bless other organizations. And maybe finally, there will be a time where, you will just want to enjoy life with your family, with your friends, and not just not have too much to think about with regards to the larger, socio-political world out there.
So you evolve into other roles. So it's like what, as you like it, Shakespeare said, Jacko said, the 7 ages.
Yes.
Right? So it's a different thing that you do in each of those different areas. Just like what you did. I suppose you retired from politics or you took a break from politics.
Yeah, I took a break
I'm
from
not
frontline
sure.
politics.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a good political statement. They never say they retire, right? They always say, I take a break. Right. So in that sense, we find today, let's just go back, just a very quick one, about the President Biden and Trump debate. And I watched both sides of it. And yesterday I saw one host very clearly articulating that yes, he has had gaffes. Yes, he walks slowly. Yes, he speaks a bit slowly. But the most important thing is he still has got what it does to be the President of the United States of America. So in that perspective, does cognitive decline happen necessarily with most people when they get older? Dr. Yasmin?
Okay. Alright, so based on past study, there is no clear evidence on where cognitive performance decline when they are aging. Okay, there are a few factors that past study also revealed that some older people, they tend to be more excellent in certain skill and also aspects.
Okay,
so this is known as what we call as a crystallized intelligence.
Crystallized intelligence,
Yes,
okay.
exactly.
That's a new word I heard this morning.
alright.
I've always heard multiple intelligence, spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence. Now we got crystallized intelligence.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. This is where a person are able to, let's say, normally we have what we call an established schema and also the way of thinking about things. Okay, crystallized intelligence is where a person, normally older people, they are able to what we call that integrate the new information, okay, to the one that we have already established. Alright, so normally based on the study, they show that older people are better in this, the condition.
It's like what Kuan Min said, that just take the benefit of your experience and use it in an adjacent field.
Yes, correct answer. And even older people are able to synthesize new information better as compared with the younger one.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the things that maybe not so much from the cognitive psychological perspective, but more from the perspective of how much you can contribute in the line of work that you're in. Let's say in politics, since we're talking about politics, right? The accumulated experience I found is very important, because the more you know about the system, the more you know how government at the federal, national, federal, state and local levels work, the more you're able to use that information to crystallize into ways that can make you a much more effective politician. But then I think there will be a time where, where they say father time is undefeated, where your ability to use and process use current information and process new information to integrate that information would, I think, slowly but surely be less effective, right? Yeah. And I think that is the kind of discussion we're having right now.
Yeah, sure. But then Kuan Min, having said that, two things. I know that maybe as people talk about in all these talk shows, President Biden probably has the ability to deliver what it takes. But the question is, can we trust someone? Let's say if there was a serious situation at 12 o'clock at night, would we be able to trust the president who is 81 and who is showing signs of mental decline? That's one. And number two is, I would certainly wish to be led by a person of a younger generation, because he is able to relate to the expectations of the younger generation. We already have a generation gap. I live in a certain era, and of course the older person lived in a certain era and the younger person lived in a certain era. I know how children basically think through things differently. So based on these two issues, can I trust someone older? And would it be just perfectly normal for someone to expect people to be led by a person of that generation rather than someone older? Maybe we'll get on to Kuan Min.
So to respond to those 2 points, firstly, I think that the debate performance of President Biden wasn't an isolated case. There have been other cases where people have observed him not being as sharp as he was before. And also, more worryingly, the fact that his office within the White House has been protecting him, not allowing journalists to have access to him only until very recently, because they are afraid that his perhaps his cognitive decline will be much more obvious, right? So, I think for President Biden, it may be happening to him when he's at this age, around 80. For others, maybe their cognitive functions is still pretty good. You look at somebody like Tun Mahathir, for example, still able to articulate very clearly. But it's something that I would definitely be concerned about, because if, let's say, that cognitive decline is already happening, there are periods of mistakes or gaps that he has made. What gives me the confidence that if, let's say, there is a call at 3 a.m., for example, with regards to an international crisis, will he be at the top of his faculties?
Yes, exactly.
If, let's say, he's suffering from some sort of a cold or illness, maybe he won't be able to perform at the level that we expect him to be. That's number one.
Sure.
The second point, I think it's clear from the polling in the US, and I think many other countries are moving towards a direction where they want younger leaders,
sure,
not just for the sake of age, but they want younger leaders with some experience, but also with new ideas, to be able to not just relate to the younger generation, but to be able to put in policies that are reflective of the dramatic changes that society is facing now. The older you are, I don't think, the harder it is, I think, for you to be able to understand what generative AI is, what large language models are, how people use technology to engage with each other and with the world. So I think there is a good argument for having that replacement.
Yeah, thank you. But I largely think that you mentioned about one or two people by name, but largely I think even if they are very sharp and articulate in their thoughts, I think they're disconnected from the young people. They are disconnected from reality and the expectations of the younger generation. I'm sure that I agree with you that Thun is very sharp and active, and you look at him at 99 years old, he puts a lot of us to shame. But then sometimes I wonder, older people, because they're from another era, they can be disconnected. And that's one of the reasons why in the corporate world, as entrepreneurs, we always say that beyond 70, 75, it's time to let go the reins to younger people and do what you do best. Yeah, but let go. So, disconnecting with reality.
Just one small point on this, Tan Sri, which is, I think there is that generation gap, there is that disconnectedness, and I kind of felt that when I was serving under Tun Mahathir as well. Of course, he had somebody like Syed Saddiq to interpret a lot of the aspirations of the younger people to him. But I would say this, I think if, let's say, the older you are, if you are able to use technology to keep up to date with the newest trends and also the newest connection points with the younger generation. So for example, do you still use new apps to do things like e-payments, your e-wallets, your insurance policies, your banking? Right, so these things that are things that the masses use. If let's say you are not in touch, you are not using it, I would say that the disconnect will grow further and further. Right, but if let's say you are forcing yourself to expose yourself to these kinds of things, and let me just trick question, Tan Sri, I hope you don't mind me asking. Did you open any digital bank accounts recently?
Good question. Yeah. I must admit I haven't, I know that many times my children, they were in the UK and the US, and when they decided to come back to Malaysia, of course we are very happy with that. And they talk about cryptocurrency, bitcoins, and they talk about digital bank. I haven't, but I made an investment in a digital bank. But I have not yet had a digital bank account. I've always used credit cards, And for a long time, even when in the 90s and 2000, I couldn't understand the concept of convergence when Steve Jobs talked about it, etc. But then as I went on, even people said that email is going to be obsolete, etc. Didn't quite understand until WhatsApp came and took over your life, But then a couple of months ago, my daughter said, "Why are you using your credit card? So why don't I get something for you on your mobile phone and you just scan and just keep paying?"
Yes, exactly.
You get it. I said, yeah, it's good because I've seen friends in Europe, they use the watch and then they pay.
Yes.
But I said, I'm just nervous, I've not used cash for a long time, so I must admit that, but I've used cards. So I'm now just becoming a big fan of touch and go in Malaysia and Google Pay and e-wallets and things like that. But to answer the question, no, don't have a bank account.
So I think that would be one example, in terms of how younger people, older people need to have these kinds of opportunities so that they can understand what the younger people are facing.
But having said that, I think about a year back, my children came and said to me, "Papa, you do a lot of writing, but why don't you actually look at ChatGPT and AI?" And I've used it, and I've been stunned sometimes because I feel that it makes you look like an idiot because it does everything for you. You ask for a summary, and you don't run the risk of actually copying someone's work without acknowledging, because basically AI does everything for you the way you prompt. So that's
that would be a good example of how you still can use some of these tools and relate it to the experiences of the younger generation.
But that goes back psychologically to the issue of the willingness of the older person to listen. Would that be correct?
Yeah, definitely, that's right. And this is
so how do you encourage someone like your parents to listen to you to kind of do what Kuan Min says, some of the newer things in life?
Right. Normally we're going to show them what's going to be and how it is considered as easy for us to use it as well. So it is also, make me to feel that it is something to do with the theory that I would like to explain to you. That is Erik Erikson theory, where adult or old people under the highest stage, that is integrity versus despair. Okay, so normally old people who are categorized under integrity, these people are very active in and also learn new things from the new generation as well. So they have a very good experiences that they would like to share, and they want to gain more from the new generation as well. So this is also can reflect to the condition and the situation that you are talking about just now.
Yeah, sure. Kuan Min?
Yeah, there's a term that I've heard quite often lately. It's called active aging.
Yeah.
Right? So active aging, I think, connotes the sense that we want to encourage the older generation to continue to try to engage with different things, whether it's through psychological, educational, physical, spiritual, emotional kind of engagements, so that they can continue to be active members of society. Yeah, and I think that's what Dr. Yasmin pointed to.
I think I heard something very similar, conscious aging. So I've just got past what you said is the young old.
Young old.
Yeah, young old. So I'm not old young.
Young at heart.
Young at heart. But sometimes when I hit 65, I said I needed to do something different. So when my children were back, I said, okay, why don't you actually take over for me? And then I decided to climb Tiger's Nest in Bhutan. Was scary, but then I said, no, let me do it.
Very challenging, right?
Very challenging. I had my Apple Watch, so every time my watch heart rate went up to 130, I would sit down. Because it's not meant to be a race, it's meant to just enjoy the process. Then of course I'm trying Mount Kinabalu and I want to try Mount Everest, but then my children said, Mount Everest no, but you can try Kinabalu.
Kinabalu, I think, is a good start.
Yeah, good start. So the point is, I have tried to do different things. Okay, so like what do you say, active aging or conscious aging. I do try to do swimming 3 times a week, exercise 3 times a week, reading a lot more that I do a podcast, do more writing. But at the same time, as I get older, I also find one thing, Kuan Min, very difficult to do, which is trying to take a stand. I'm always very ambivalent. So if, let's say, someone very close to Joe Biden would call me up and say, what do you think? And I would always say it all depends.
Yes.
Because it's more difficult to take a stand for the simple reason you don't want to hurt people. So that's where I see. So do you think there is a difference from a psychological perspective, considering active aging and integrating and all that, between physiological age and social age? Is that the difference that we're talking about? A social age, you can still be old, but you can be still relevant in that society.
Okay, so social is actually referring to the social norm, okay, that normally our culture expect us to achieve based on certain social milestone. All right, so but currently, based on what we have go through a lot of research, etc., social age is not really that relevant to the current era and also to the generation themselves.
Well, that's what Kuan Min said. Kuan Min said, as long as you are relevant to the context, it's okay for you to be. It's only that I think he mentioned about term limits, because you wanted opportunities and you wanted career ladders and you wanted different perspectives.
Yeah, so Tan Sri, the point about having term limits is to prevent, on the most part, people from having to make those kinds of personal calls or personal judgments. If, let's say, because the constitution or some regulation has said, after 2 terms, I'm out. Then, even if, let's say, I'm in great shape and all that, I need to look for a successor. And I think this is part and parcel of the larger conversation that we need to have. And it's not just about whether politicians should, retire at a certain age, but what are the kind of systems and structures that if you put in place to encourage younger people to come into the political landscape, talented people, people with the ability to lead the country, and then later on to have the older generation step aside, maybe in an advisory capacity, like what Singapore does with their senior minister after the Prime Minister steps down. And I think those kinds of succession planning is much better for a country and also for a organization compared to a situation like what we're seeing in the US, where you have two candidates that have quite a number of flaws themselves and certain challenges maybe from a cognitive perspective.
Yeah. So Kuan, just to take on that, I think Philippines has got a one 7-year term limit for the president.
Yes, but that's nothing to do with age. I think it's got to do with their political history. Similarly for Mexico, that's also one term limit
Sri Lanka,
as well.
I think.
Yes, so you have those kinds of situations, but I would actually push a bit more. I would say that not just for presidential systems, I think for prime minister systems, parliamentary systems, you should think about introducing a term limit of let's say 2 terms, so that there is that kind of continuity in terms of succession planning, and you force the political parties to plan early so that the people know, okay, it's going to be 1 term, and then at most 1 more term, I got to look for a replacement, maybe in my 2nd term.
Yeah, but for me, I think I wouldn't be far away from the views of most people if we said that Malaysia didn't have a great succession plan.
Yes, I would
think
agree.
if we go back in the last 40 years, I think we can talk about talent management, talent development, whatever, but I think we have floundered on that.
Maybe Tan Sri, can I ask Dr. Yasmin this question from a psychological standpoint? Why is it that leaders, and in this case political leaders, who have stayed on in power or are in power, why do they not want to let go? What is the psychological reasoning behind their obsession with wanting to hold on to power? Macam like gila kuasa sikit.
Just give up. Yeah.
Alright, so normally when it comes to this situation, these people, normally they are very confident with their own what we call as leadership capability. Yeah, so they think that they still have something to contribute to the society, to the country, based on what they have gone through and gained throughout their life. Okay, so this is actually categorized under the person that I mentioned just now, those in an integrity group.
Yeah, but to me, I think the most important is it's about the abilities that's required. One is, your ability to critically think, your ability to solve problems, your ability to be objective, your ability to basically take a principled stand, not so much be influenced. I know that sometimes in politics we talk about, I want to win the next election. Why did we actually do away with the GST? Because we wanted to win the election. But just going back, forgetting about that issue, the issue is how do we actually kind of have a vision for the future? Now, how can someone who is at 80, probably on the verge of getting into Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or dementia, whatever it is, how can they lead the world in? Or if I have a pipeline of leaders who are not even in the 50s or 60s, but they're all above 70s, and that's what prompted me to ask this question, should we have a retirement age? After 70, politicians cannot be in politics.
So Tan Sri, I'll respond first, and then I'd like to hear Dr. Jasmine's view on this.
Sure.
You mentioned one very important point, objectivity, right? So I think at that age and at that level of power, maybe right at the top, I think it's very hard for politicians to have total objectivity because they've worked hard to get there. They obviously are confident of their own capabilities, and I also think that they may not necessarily take objective advice well. That's one. Second thing is, they are not able to objectively evaluate whether or not their successors can do a better job. In the case of Malaysia, some leaders think that they are always better than whoever succeeds them. And it may be true for other countries as well. So I think that makes it hard for this kind of objective thinking, especially if, let's say, you have attained a certain stature and age. What do you think, Dr. Yasmin?
I do agree with whatever that you have mentioned just now. And I'm quite interested with Tan Sri's mentioning that something to do with the dementia and etc. Alright, so actually dementia, Alzheimer, all those what we call as brain disorders actually will happen to all
because
these
of
people.
the longevity of people. People live longer, as what Kuan Min said.
Yeah. So we have to take into account on those things as well, where at certain point, those politicians have to remind themselves that they are no longer young.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have to focus more on their self. Okay, so because they have, past research also mentioned that old people have higher tendency to get all those things. Okay, all right. So
I had a friend of mine who just retired as a president, and I asked him, this was actually President Fidel Ramos, I think, in the Philippines, and he became a great friend. And he said two things to me. He said, I want to remind politicians, and if you can help me remind, and I keep saying this, he says, President Fidel Ramos says, going up Mount Everest is a choice,
yes.
but coming down is mandatory. You can't stay there forever.
Yeah.
And number two, the first thing he had when he became the president of the Philippines, he called up someone from Harvard and said to this guy, please tell me, what should I do? I'm now the chief executive of a country, not of an army, so it's different. I can't command, I got to collaborate and I got to engage. And apparently the person from Harvard said, just remember this one thing, nobody tells you the truth. Nobody tells you the truth. So going back, and I just had one more question, and that was responsibilities and the role of politician. Is there any way, Kuan Min, that we can actually persuade people to just step away when it's time?
Yeah, so other than term limits, I think the other thing that we should try to do is to create pathways for retired politicians to continue to contribute in different arenas. So for example, if let's say you find that this person is still able to be a chairman of some sort of a government agency and contribute. If let's say this person can head up some sort of a think tank, this person has accumulated a lot of friends in important places in other countries. There may be some sort of emeritus position that he or she can undertake in order to make sure that those ties can be used for the benefit of the country. I think those are things that we need to give more thought towards, and our current leaders also need to think about that so that they can think of exit strategies for themselves.
Prof, would you want to say something else?
Something to do, something like
mentor-mentee
program, right? The old leaders, should guide and also help the new leaders to actually at least be better, for the sake of our country and also the future for everyone.
But the concept of mentor-mentee is, I can actually mentor you, I can just give you guidance, but the decision is yours.
Yes, sure.
And if you decide otherwise, I don't get upset.
Yes.
But unfortunately, sometimes we see that is if you decide otherwise, the older person gets upset.
Definitely.
Now, does this feeling of getting upset, does it come from loneliness, or a feeling that I'm irrelevant, or I am a feeling that people have forgotten me? Does it come from there?
It's nothing to do with loneliness, actually, Tan Sri. It's more like
esteem.
Not esteem, like self-confidence.
But some of the older people are very self-confident. They are some great self-confidence, but still they get very upset when the successors do something else.
And also self-value, Tan Sri, means that that person wants to be valued by the person that they are facing or communicating with. Alright, so self-value means that you help something and you want people to appreciate you for whoever you are.
And this is what Obama said, Kuan Min. He said, the last thing I want to do is to go and tell my successor what to do and what not to do. We might have a contest of ideas. I might not agree on the idea, but I will keep it straight to the idea. And I will try and lobby as best as I can to get my ideas sold. But if not, then
Yeah, because
that's it.
because the person who has retired, in this case Obama, he's no longer the chief executive.
Exactly.
And I think he also understands that whatever views that he gives, ultimately it is President Biden's
Of course.
decision. And of course, I think what I really value in somebody like President Obama is that he does not air these kinds of disagreements in public in his capacity as a former president.
It's a contest of ideas, and let's keep straight to the idea rather than getting into the extremes. Yeah, you know what happened in France now. Yeah, you know, the right was about to win the election, and of course they had it. So coming back, so last question again, same question.